Hi, welcome to CES 2021, a very special and unique show, and I'm so glad you're here. My name is Gary Shapiro, and I'm President and CEO of the Consumer Technology Association. And in this special session, we will have a unique interview with focusing on President Biden and his administration's approach to technology and innovation. In just a few days, we in the United States will welcome in a new president, Joe Biden, as our 46th president. Of course, a new president brings a new administration, a new focus on technology and innovation and trade. These are issues important not only to the United States and its companies here, but important globally. Because as we know, for the last 4 years, there's been a different sort of tone on trade and technology. So the question we're asking, how will this new administration approach technology, innovation, competitiveness, and trade? So please join me in welcoming Brian Deese, the incoming director of the National Economic Council. Brian Deese will serve as director of the National Economic Council, advising President-elect Biden on domestic and international economic policy and coordinating the economic agenda of the Biden-Harris administration. He is a former senior advisor to President Barack Obama, and he was instrumental both in engineering the rescue of the U.S. auto industry and in negotiating the landmark Paris Climate Agreement. But he's also a crisis-tested advisor with broad experience in accelerating economic prosperity, empowering working Americans, and harnessing the very economic opportunities that come from building a clean energy economy and combating the climate crisis. He has held a variety of key roles helping national leaders navigate some of the biggest challenges of our generation. During the Obama-Biden administration, he served as special assistant to the president for economic policy after the 2008 financial crisis. He served as deputy director of the National Economic Council and as deputy director and acting director of the Office of Management and Budget. In his role as global head of sustainable investing at BlackRock, Deese has worked to drive greater focus on climate and sustainability risk in investment portfolios and create investment strategies to help accelerate a transition to a low carbon environment. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Middlebury College and a professional degree from Yale. So please join me in welcoming Brian Deese. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks a lot, Gary. I'm excited to be here with you and with the audience.
Yeah, so could you tell us about this new role and what it means for our domestic viewers and also for the international viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Economic Council is a body within the White House, and it is tasked with coordinating economic policy on behalf of the executive branch and on behalf of the president. So what that means is both taking the direction and the vision of the president and building it into a concrete action plan for economic prosperity, but also making sure that across all of our agencies, we have a disciplined decision-making process where issues can be heard, but then decided effectively and efficiently. This process is particularly important at moments of economic crisis, where making decisions with the right information, but at the right time and in the right cadence is really important. And so that's what we're going to be focused on as we get rolling here in the new administration, building the National Economic Council and getting to work.
So you're taking the role that Larry Kudlow had and that others, the new vice chairman of IBM, had before you.
Correct. Correct. That's the National Economic Council director. And for those outside the U.S., the NEC was created by executive order in 1993. So it's been now in place for almost 30 years.
And that's a cabinet level position, isn't it?
It is it is an assistant to the president, and it is depending on the administration, it's cabinet level or other are not. But the tasking of the NEC director is to bring the economic cabinet around an individual, a single table. So not just your Treasury Secretary and your OMB director, but your Secretary of Commerce, your Secretary of Labor, of HUD and SBA, all together to make economic policy decisions with the right information and the right people around the table.
Well, the big issue affecting the world is obviously COVID and the COVID response, and the tech industry's played a role. How do you see that in terms of going forward, and what's your view of the tech industry in terms of helping actually revive our economy?
Well, look, I mean, the vaccine itself is actually a testament to American innovation, to technology, and to partnership with between public and private sector. And I think that we have a unique opportunity to restore science to our basic decision making in general, but in particular around how we're going to combat this vaccine. I want to be very clear, this is going to be hard. Our operational challenge to extend vaccines, distribute, and get them into people's arms will be one of the most complicated and costly operational challenges in our country's history. And there's a set of things where we need to get them done and where there's a lot of opportunity for partnership. We need to work with Congress to fund that distribution effort. And we're going to need to partner with the private sector, technology companies and other companies with logistical expertise, supply chain expertise. Tech companies can really help in the public health response, including making sure that we are combating misinformation and providing clear information to the public. And other key elements of this, the president-elect has talked about helping schools reopen safely, incredibly important to our economy and to the health of our kids. And that's a place where broadband, accessing the digital divide is absolutely essential. And it's a place, again, where partnership with the private sector will be key. So as we take on the virus directly and as we think about building back with more resilience than our economy had coming into this crisis, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for partnership and a lot of work to get done.
Well, certainly the tech industry has been pretty active in playing a role to make a difference with the economy. They've also seem to be talked about in dominating the stock exchanges. And there's some obviously bipartisan interest in regulating the tech industry. How do you perceive the tech industry, number one, in our role in U.S. competitiveness, and number two, as an industry which is worthy of the regulation? And having said that, I want to make clear, as a representative of the tech industry, we're not against regulation. We'd love to have the guardrails to know it's legal, but we're very concerned about the impact on competitiveness and innovation.
Look, the president-elect really takes a perspective of what is going to be good for the economy, and his metric of economic health is whether American families and the American middle class is able to have economic dignity and be able to be able to achieve their economic objectives. That's going to be our North Star. A big part of doing that is investing here at home to build our competitive strength. We have, in a lot of different areas, underinvested and under-resourced our own domestic capabilities. And that's a place where we're going to focus on targeting investments, whether that's in R&D, manufacturing, or otherwise, to try to build up that strength. And we're going to look to partner with the private sector where we can. But there are also places that, as you know well, that the president-elect has identified where he does believe that our regulatory architecture doesn't capture the needs and of the economy. And so we're going to be working with Congress in those areas as well.
So you and the Biden administration actually specifically, we talked about the Build Back Better vision. What is that at its core, and how could tech help?
Yeah, look, the Build Back Better is it's a nice alliteration, but it's a really important economic concept, which is the core idea is that recognizing even in a moment of economic crisis, we have big structural challenges and therefore opportunities to address structural economic issues that have held back our economy's potential. And if we get it right, can really help to drive productivity, can help drive wage growth and shared prosperity going forward. And so there's a lot of opportunity, again, to partner here as we go hard at this economic crisis and recognize the real inequities that we're seeing across the American economy today. We want to think about how we can approach those in a way that actually builds back better, builds back more resilient. So whether that's with respect to the climate crisis and thinking about how we can invest in infrastructure, create jobs, but in a way where our economy is more resilient, we're reducing emissions, and we are putting ourselves on a trajectory to a low carbon economy. Or we think about attacking the structural inequities and racial inequities that our country has been plagued with for far too long, as we invest to try to address those issues in the immediate crisis, address the fact that this crisis is disproportionately hitting Black and brown businesses, for example. How do we do that in a way that actually builds more runway to actually access capital in the future, to have more entrepreneurship, to have more innovation within our domestic economy? That's what Build Back Better is really all about. How do we take advantage of this moment to invest in the long-term structural changes, the positive changes that we want to see in the economy?
So economists like numbers, and if we were talking 4 years from now, how would you measure your and the administration's success in terms of what indicators should we be looking at?
Well, it's a great question, and what economists can agree on is they can't agree on any particular number, and I think that that's probably with good reason. I think in the past there has been, I think, too much focus on kind of headline macroeconomic numbers, looking at quarterly GDP, and missing the fact that if we're growing in ways that are exacerbating these inequities, if we're growing in ways that aren't actually improving the productivity of the economy and the potential of our workers, then we end up seeing some of these inequities persist, and they will actually constrain our long-term growth potential. So when we think about it, again, the President-elect's North Star is a healthy economy is one in which growth is being broadly shared. And so we're seeing a growing economy, but we're seeing the fruits of that being felt across the population, both from an income spectrum and in terms of communities across the country geographically and otherwise that have too often been left behind. So that doesn't always distill down into a particular statistic. It's not just about economic growth. It's not just about job growth. It's about the quality of those jobs and the security that comes along with them. But I think it's a pretty clear North Star that we're gonna be able to work against as we think about crafting economic policy.
Well, you are certainly one of the youngest NEC directors ever. And how do you plan then to aim towards that North Star and, as you say, ensure Americans are in on the deal?
Well, look, I think a couple of things. One is we want to innovate and challenge ourselves to do things differently than have been done before. And I think if you look at the President-elect's economic vision itself, it is innovative and new in lots of respects. We have not seen in the past the centrality of addressing the climate crisis or addressing issues of racial equity being central to an economic strategy in a way that this president has committed that they will. But we're also going to look to try to do things differently in terms of how we make economic policy as well. Thinking about how we can be more creative and innovative and harness the potential of innovators across the U.S., for example, to deliver on policy outcomes in ways that meet people where they are. A lot of our policy fail not in policy design, but in policy execution, going that last mile to actually get the benefit to the training program to the worker who really needs it, get the health and wellness benefit to that family in a way that works in their lives. And there's a lot of opportunity to use new tools, new technologies to innovate in that space as well.
So when President-elect Biden introduced you or appointed you, he talked about your great environmental work as one of his main reasons for tapping you, and obviously your experience in the area, in the same place you're in. Our research actually shows that the tech industry is able to reduce its footprint while still growing economically. And we as an industry and as an association have said we think the U.S. should be in the Paris Accords. We're concerned that China has very little obligations under to do anything until 2029, and they could continue to pollute until then and then just maintain that level, plus they're getting lots of money. So the question really is what can we do in the tech industry to help you on your efforts on climate and sustainability? And what's the deal with the Paris Accord? Do you expect to get back in? And what about China?
Well, number one, the president-elect committed that on day one we would rejoin the Paris Agreement, and I can commit that will be the case. Number two, the president-elect has said that just rejoining Paris is not sufficient. It's not sufficient for where the science says we need to be, and it's not sufficient because we've lost critical time over the last couple of years. So he's committed, and you will see us not only rejoin Paris, but engage multilaterally with allies across major emitting allies across the world to work together on how we can increase the ambition of our climate mitigation efforts, our emissions reductions efforts, and how we can do that in a multilateral way. China is obviously a big part of that, and I anticipate that we will be engaging directly with the Chinese on their climate commitments and how we can, where we can find areas where we can find ambition. We can find ambition together.
I'm sorry. How about China and trade and tariffs? Any thoughts on that? What do you think will be going on there the first 30 days of life at the NEC?
Well, look, I want to be clear, and I won't get into specific trade, get ahead of ourselves in terms of very specific moves or measures. But I think it's clear that China is our most serious global competitor, and this competition is going to be one of the central challenges of this century. And one of the most important elements of the president-elect's vision for how to approach this competition is that we need to rebuild our core areas of strength in the United States. So I think one of the things you're going to see early on is a focus on investing domestically in our people, in our economy, in our democracy, building our industrial strength, having a clearer strategy around how to secure supply chains, how to use the procurement dollars that we invest to actually build economic capability in the United States. And that we have a lot of work to do here at home to do that. That will position us as well. And the second thing is to revitalize our alliances and our partnerships around the world, because this is the other thing that I think you've heard very clearly from the president-elect is we will take a multilateral approach. That is in the United States' interest, because when we are working together with our friends toward common goals, we can achieve more on behalf of the American people.
So our allies will become our allies again?
That's look, that's certainly the goal. And obviously, we will have a lot of issues that we'll have to address, a lot of challenges that have stacked up over the last couple of years, including with our closest allies around the world. So there's going to be work to do across the board. But absolutely, when we think about global economic issues, we are going to start from the perspective that we want to sit down with our allies, work through these issues, identify areas where we can work together. For example, to put pressure on Beijing and hold them accountable when they are violating the rules. We're going to be better positioned doing that if we're working closely with our allies.
Absolutely. So how do you feel about tariffs as a tool?
Look, I think we're going to start from the perspective of what is the overall strategy and what are the overall objectives, and then look at the tools that we have across the board. I think part of the challenge that we've seen over the last couple of years has been the lack of a coherent strategy and the application of tools in a way that doesn't actually add up to an approach that actually helps U.S. companies, U.S. Workers, and the U.S. economy. So that's going to be, we're going to look at what is the overall approach and how do we deploy tools in the toolbox. And try to bring more coherence to that approach than we've seen over the last couple of years.
Well, I think the business community is looking towards a little more steadiness and predictability rather than waking up and reading a Twitter feed and seeing how your business life is going to change and your business has to resource and move. I mean, certainly there's been a move away from China in terms of sole source manufacturing and to Vietnam, to other areas around the world. And that's something that is probably for the U.S. is healthy in the long run. But in terms of short notices, tariffs the next week, things like that, I know, given your varied background, including business, I hope we have some empathy there that, our businesses, they need a little bit of planning. They need a little bit of time. They want to do what's the right thing. But I'm sure that's something your administration will be considering.
Well, one of the perspectives that I think we will bring is that when we think about the goals that we're trying to accomplish, you referenced earlier climate. Ultimately, the way that we're going to accelerate the decarbonization of our economy is by moving massive quantums of private capital. And one of the ways to do that is to provide certain long-term signals so that the allocators of that capital can actually have confidence that it makes more sense to invest in the low carbon solution, not only because it's more cost efficient today, but it's going to be more cost efficient 5 or 10 years from now. So, there is a value to providing stability in terms of policy signals. And I want to be clear that we're going to take some approaches that are going to really focus on U.S. jobs, U.S. competitiveness, and investing here in the United States. That's going to be the core focus, but we're going to try to do that in a way where we're pretty clear and communicating clearly about, again, why the steps we're taking fit into an overall strategy.
Well, you certainly are correct in doing that. And you mentioned the U.S. workers a number of times and jobs, and that's an area of focus. And when people look at the various administrations, and of course, there's always a focus on the differences, but sometimes they're the same. I mean, the question that I keep getting, I've been telling reporters, is the truth is the Trump administration pretty much followed what the Obama-Biden administration has done in terms of technology priorities involving artificial intelligence, drones, self-driving cars. The future is there, and we can see it, and the U.S. it has to be part of it. And there are the continuation of policies. Not so with trade and tariffs, but in the jobs area, I have to say, I think the Trump administration under Ivanka Trump's guidance and others, the Secretary Ross, really focused on skills and workforce and jobs, and had companies stepping up and committing to train workers for the jobs. And they shifted us to white collar apprenticeship programs. And a lot of our companies in our industry and other industries have stepped up and are pretty happy with the cooperative nature of that, and with the focus on the fact that we need skilled workers. We need skilled workers to succeed. Is that something where your administration will continue to focus on and address the skills gap and prepare the workforce for the future, and recognize that not everyone is a 4-year college degree without any real skills that employers can need?
So a couple of things here. One is the building out of skills for workers, particularly those workers who are coming out of post-secondary or coming out of secondary and looking at what are their options in this economy, is going to be an absolute focus. And what we see from the data and what we see across the U.S., some of the regional differences, the big geographic differences in economic opportunity and mobility, are because of the lack of on-ramps and the ability to get the skills that are connected to the jobs that are near where you need to be. So President-elect Biden is very focused on a significant increase in the number of apprenticeships. That apprenticeships, when done right and when built with the right partnership with labor and with companies, can really be effective. We want to strengthen the registered apprenticeship programs. We want to partner with unions, because the unions have actually overseen and developed some of the best apprenticeship programs in the country, and make sure that there really is an on-ramp even pre-apprenticeship, because for some folks, they need a little bit of additional skilling even to be able to effectively go into an apprenticeship program. So, but this is a place, again, where, I think we need a more holistic approach as well, because we can't just focus on having apprenticeships. We also have to have our community colleges strengthened. We have to make it affordable. And this is a place where we're going to need to work with Congress to make the investments in this space as well.
So obviously workers is a big part of going forward, and skilled workers. That's great to hear. Competition. This is a big issue. Obviously, there's a few big tech companies, but there's many, many, many others. In fact, we have at CTA over 2,000 American companies that are our members. Only a few of the really big names that are getting a lot of the visibility and the attack for various issues involving content that they may have on their websites. But yet there are literally hundreds of other websites where there's user-generated content. And what's happened is the U.S. has been a leader in many areas of technology, and the rest of the world has picked up on it. And now with the attacks on U.S. technology companies and other countries now following those attacks and bringing lawsuits and imposing new taxes and things like that, and the tech companies being such a big part of the stock market indices and portfolios of Americans in 401ks and IRAs, what are we going to do to make sure that we could not only protect our own companies, but enhance them, to make sure that we have innovation occurring in the U.S. and then we are globally competitive as some others. And again, I come back to China, who's put up huge barriers against our tech companies. Companies like Apple and Google and others are and Facebook and Twitter are barred from even selling many of their products there. Is that something that's going to be part of your focus?
Look, I think to your question, there's a set of things that we need to do to make sure that we have a level playing field globally, and that we have a healthy economy where companies that are playing by the rules can actually thrive and be good employers, create good jobs. So number one, we've touched on a little bit. The U.S. government can play a ongoing role in investing in the underlying drivers of innovation. The R&D, the basic research that has actually laid the groundwork for a lot of the innovation and a lot of the technology that then our private companies are innovating around. The second is working to make sure that we are that our companies across the board, not just in tech, but across the economy, are able to compete on a level playing field. And when countries aren't playing fair, that we call them out. We're prepared to take action. And you've identified some places where there's real headwinds, and we're going to have to be direct about that. The third thing I would say, though, is that our private sector companies, our large employers, and the technology companies in particular, they have an obligation to think about what it is that they can do to address persistent challenges that are real, and that the president-elect has spoken to, and that we see consumers and the American people being concerned about as well. And so I think that there's an opportunity here, but also an obligation on companies as well to say, what is it that they can do to be more thoughtful about how they're treating their workforce, about how they're dealing with the data that they operate with, and about recognizing that this really is there are stakeholders other than the shareholder that are important and essential for their own long-term profitability and their license to operate.
Well, I appreciate that. Our time is almost expired, but I'd like to ask you, what is it you're most concerned about going forward in this position, other than like balancing family and work life? And is it something that you anticipate you'll be working from home, or will you be in the White House? How will that work?
So on the last question, we'll be moving to DC, and we're going to try, like most employers, we're going to be very careful about following protocol, but the objective is to do as much work in person as possible. Looking on what I'm worried about, we are in the middle of an economic crisis, and this economic crisis, it's different than 2009. It's different in really important ways. But it is having profound impacts and very unequal impacts for millions of Americans. Millions of Americans right now, this month, are not sure how they're going to put food on the table. They're not sure what they're going to do as and when a moratorium on evictions or foreclosures expires. And and the choices and the decisions that we make over the next couple of months are going to have a profound impact, not just on the shape of the top line economic trajectory, but for millions of American families. So my principal worry, my principal concern, but also our animating focus is going to be on how can we move quickly, deliberately, but with all of the collective force we can bring to stem this crisis. And while we're doing that, build back better as well. And one of the things that I took away from my experience in 2009, and I see squarely now, is that the risks, as we assess them now, the risks of doing too little, of undershooting, far outweigh the risks of doing too much. And so we have to bring that approach into the White House and into governing, and that's going to be our principal challenge, but also the principal opportunity as well.
Well, that's great. And thank you, Brian, because I will speak on behalf of the consumer technology industry. We want you to succeed. We're looking forward to an administration that has that balanced approach, and if the no drama Obama has worn off with the Biden, President-elect Biden, that would be great, because we're looking for a steady hand. We're focused on the health of the U.S. economy and, frankly, the global economy as well. and we're looking forward to moving forward. We all have kids, and some of us have grandkids, and we want a better future for them. And I think that's what most Americans share, whether or not, if we're not talking about politics and we're not talking about masks, I think everyone agrees that we want a better world for our kids. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to this global audience, and we all wish you well. We really do, and thank you.
Thanks, Gary.